next point that Lissa makes is that they are often extremely insightful and intuitive and use your traumatic wounded to hook your most burdened inner children and try to get those parts to bond to them so they can control you. And this is really true. I've observed in some of these church organisations the counselling methods that they use, and a lot of it is based on accessing your most vulnerable inner child, or your most vulnerable, your most critical hurt, and they want to dig at you until they find that, and they'll either try and exercise it or own it so that they've got that over you. So once that they know these things about you, you're so beholden to them because you feel like you've exposed your soul to them, and that at any time they could, you know, shame you. And they often will. They'll often shame you. And the problem is with the shaming that you even become more beholden to them when you've been shamed, because you believe it. You believe what they've said is about you is true. So you've said, okay, so let's take, for example, when I fell pregnant. Okay, so I've told you about the circumstances. Me and my boyfriend, you know, he was 18, I was 20, and I fell pregnant out of wedlock. So I go and tell the pastors what's happened, looking for some sort of support, looking for a little bit of, you know, encouragement that it'll be okay, we've got you, we'll support you. You know, you've been a part of this church family for a while. We understand that you know, oh, well, things happen and we'll look after you. Well, what they actually did was they requested that Ben and I get up in front of the youth group and apologise for what we'd done to them. So it sounds ridiculous now, and it is ridiculous. I mean, why we agreed to do it was because, you know, we just wanted to we wanted to stay. We wanted to be in our family, and we didn't want to have to leave. So we did what we were told, basically, because we thought that that was how we were going to get the support that we needed, how we were going to stay in our family. You know, we didn't want to leave. But what it ended up doing was it made us beholden to those leaders, because outside of the church context, it didn't make any sense. It made no sense to my parents. It made no sense to, you know, any friends that we had outside the church. It only made sense in the context of the church. And so we went through this incredibly traumatic experience of having to stand up in front of our peers and apologise to them for something that is actually quite natural and normal and happens all the time outside of the church. And then we were bought in. We felt like we were hooked because we couldn't go anywhere else and describe or explain what we'd just done, because it didn't make any sense to anybody else. So we were kind of locked. We were locked into this toxic situation simply because it didn't make sense outside of the church. And that leads me to the next point that Lissa makes. They try and separate you from your family and your other loved ones who might question. So that's how they do it, is they get you to go through these ceremonies and these rituals and buy into these ways of thinking that make no sense outside the church, so that you might not even necessarily believe them, but you know that inclusion requires that you subscribe to them. So what's going on in the church feels more real than anything else, and you will do whatever is required in order to stay there, in order to still belong. Whatever mental and intellectual gymnastics that might require, it doesn't matter. It just, you've been sold. This person, you know, the leaders are just telling you, you know, this is where you belong, this is your home, this is your family, we're the ones who really understand you. No one else sees this spiritual aspect of you except for us, and that is who you really are, is that spiritual aspect of you. So in that way, you just become more and more hooked in, and more of your time and energy and psychosocial kind of energy just gets completely pulled in to the church and in serving the agenda of the grand leadership, of course. I'm not going to go through all of these points. I'm just going to grab a couple out that I think are particularly pertinent. Okay, so I'm going to skip to, they may have claimed to have access to secret knowledge directly downloaded from God or from a specific text. Now, this is the issue that we have with their so-called biblical teaching, is because the Bible, before it was assembled by King James into the Bible that we know today, it was pretty much a random assortment of books that were open to interpretation, and particularly in the Judaic tradition, around Jesus' times, when he was considered to be a rabbi, spiritual leader, the spiritual leaders used to sit around, the rabbis used to sit around with the Judaic texts, with the Torah, and they used to talk about them, and then they would ask for critical thinking and critical thought around that from their followers. So, you know, you'd have Rabbi such and such over there and Rabbi such and such over there, and they'd be sitting around talking about particular texts and saying, well, what do you think about this? No, I don't think that about that. Oh, I think God meant this, and I think Moses meant that, and I meant... You know, you were meant to critically think. You were meant to argue about it. You were meant to kind of toss it around and think about it and kind of have your own thoughts and opinions. And pretty much your spiritual leader was just there to kind of facilitate that conversation. But something happened, didn't it? What we did was we edited down all the books into one volume of however many there are now. I think it's 52, but I think that's how many Psalms there are or something. 31 books, I think it is, and that's it now. We don't argue about it, we don't talk about it, we don't discuss it. One person sits down during the week, pulls something random out, writes a message, and then stands up on Sunday and says, "Thus saith the Lord," and that's that. And it's not how the books were written. It's not how the texts were written. They weren't written to be like in concrete. They were written to interact with the human soul and spirit. They were written to inspire. They were written to make us think. They were written to share stories. They were written to, you know, express sentiment. They were written to sort of show the gamut of human experience as relates to and with God. That's what they were for, and they're beautiful for that. But it's not a fucking textbook. Sorry. It's not scientific. Let's just say it's not scientific. It's not meant to be scientific. And a lot of pastors preach the Bible as if it were a science textbook, and at the same time throwing the actual science textbook out the window. Like, I've done Bible college. I've got more qualifications probably than your average pastor, but I don't understand the Bible. I don't understand it. I've read it many, many times, and I love it, but it's ruined for me now because, you know, every time I read a passage, it's triggering because of what all these spiritual teachers have done to all of the beautiful parts over the years. It's so sad. Anyway, I'm really grateful to Lisa Rankin for writing this list. I think it's absolutely fantastic. There is one more point that I really want to make. I think is really extremely important, particularly in light of current events around Hillsong and some of the things that are happening regards the Royal Commission into institutional child sexual abuse and some court cases that are coming up soon. And I wanted to make this point. It's not in Lisa's list, but it's in mine. When something bad happens to you, according to these spiritual leaders, it's God trying to teach you something. Who knows what? That's up to you. It's like a big puzzle that God throws at you that you're supposed to solve if something bad happens to you. But when it happens to them, when something they don't want to happen happens to them, when the book gets thrown at them, when they're charged with something because they broke a law, when they're caught doing something they preach against, it's the devil attacking them. Every time. Every time. Oh, I was tempted by the devil. Oh, that person tempted me. Oh, you know, no, God's not trying to teach me a lesson. It's the devil. It's the devil. It's an attack. It's that Jezebel over there. It's that, you know, it's that person trying to bring me down. How dare they? But if it happens to you, happens to you, it's your fault because God's trying to teach you a lesson. When I had cancer, my God, I just lost count of the number of people who were telling me that, oh, God's got a special lesson for you. He's got trying to teach you something. It was so incredibly painful and frustrating because I believed that, and I was trying to make sense of my cancer experience through that lens. You know, was I supposed to witness to people in the hospital, in the intensive care ward? What was I supposed to do? I had no idea what my special job was in my cancer experience that apparently God had given me, you know, to teach me a lesson. No idea. And it caused me no end of grief. Honestly, I tried so hard to make sense of my cancer experience through that lens. And in the end, I just gave up. No, doesn't make any sense. It happened. I got better, which is really fantastic. God was fantastically, you know, I really pushed into my faith and found a new place of just resting and being a sick person. Being a sick person's okay. It's okay. It's all right. You can be a sick person and still have a relationship with God. He's not embarrassed of you. He's not ashamed of you. You know, you're not going to get kicked out of your friendship with God because you got sick. It's actually a really interesting space to be in, to be ministered to be looked after, to be supported, to be vulnerable. Like, it's really interesting experience. But that wasn't the lesson that God wanted me to learn. That was just what happened. But then I find it really, really interesting that we have spiritual leaders who have committed actual crimes, who have done things that were actually criminal, who have you know, aided and abetted criminals, who have hidden the crimes of, you know, abusers and etc., etc., who stand back and say it's an attack from the devil. It's not my fault. Not my fault. No, I'm totally pure and clean and wonderful, and, you know, it's just so sad because I'm being attacked by the devil. Bullshit. It's not the devil. You did a shitty thing that was against the law, and now it's coming back to bite you on the ass. And so I think I've married a little bit of my own beliefs here with Lissa Rankin's list. The first couple of points were hers, but then I've kind of shared a little bit of my own stuff. What I really want to bring home to you is that not all spiritual leaders are who they say they are. A lot of them are people who just couldn't get a job in high finance or politics because they didn't have the intellect or whatever. A lot of them have been very badly abused themselves. A great many of these evangelical Pentecostal leaders are sociopathic narcissists, and you need to be aware that that's the case. You need to go in with your eyes wide open, and you need to ask lots of questions, and you need to be critically thinking, and you need to be understanding that there is a purpose and a reason behind every single thing that they do. This is a tried and tested method that they practice, and anyone who's been in these churches or has observed these churches as I have, like I've spent half my life in them, half my life observing them, and after a while you start to see that this is a science that's been being developed since the 1970s. They have been working really, really hard to hone this, and it is a business model that really works. The spiritual stuff seems to change from time to time, but the fundamentals are always still there. And it's an environment in which these narcissistic, sociopathic, cult-type leaders absolutely thrive, because the hole at leadership that's created for that leader is shaped like that. It's shaped like a sociopathic narcissist. And you'll find that often the really genuine, really caring, really loving, absolutely, you know, genuine person who tries to fit into that mold just won't last. They won't last. It's the ones that manage to just completely click into that model that stick around. The thing is, though, that it's a very brittle model. It's very brittle. And what we're seeing at the moment is the culmination of these decades and decades and decades of this very personality-driven cult that starts with H and ends with G. And if that particular personality were to go away, the model would start to unravel, because it's very much molded on the leader's personality and their ability to motivate and generate energy from people and loyalty from people. And the business model hinges on that personality being able to sustain, you know, a certain role. And I have a feeling this is all about to go, I don't know, it could go pear-shaped. There's a court case on the 26th of November where we're all waiting, well, those who think like I do, are waiting to see what's going to happen to this personality cult that starts with H and ends with G, if this person is defying their own, you know, they just deny that they've done anything wrong, if they are actually found guilty. We'll see. We'll see. The business model will probably need to change, as it is changing right now. But, you know, looking back and looking in from the outside, all I see are the same old people, the same old faces, the same old names, the same old practices, the same old habits, the same old shaming tools, the same old falls from grace. Nothing's changed. It's all the same. It's all the same stuff. Anyway, I think I'm going to sign off there because it's like 50 minutes I've been yakking on. Yeah, if you want to know more about what I've been sharing about, feel free to contact me via my Facebook or Instagram. I am Jo Hilda on Facebook and Jo Hilda Writer, or I am Jo Hilda on Instagram. Would be great to hear from you. I'd love to hear your stories. If you'd like to be featured on a future podcast, that'd be heaps of fun. Anyway, I highly recommend you look up the writings of Lissa Rankin, Lissa Rankin, because she's just got some incredible insights as regards cults, religions, spiritual communities, and when they go pear-shaped. Thanks so much for listening to me, and I'll see you next time on A God with Dirty Feet.